back to my channel. My name is Melanie Tana and I love to talk about books and stories of all kinds. And today I'm a bit tired, a bit distracted, but hopefully the caffeine will start to kick in, as well as whatever strength I earn from my nap, so that I can talk to you about The Wheel of Time. As you probably saw by the title or the thumbnail or whatever, I am halfway through The Wheel of Time. I've read books 1 through 7, and I have some thoughts on the series. So for those of you who don't know, The Wheel of Time is a high fantasy series started in the 90s by Robert Jordan and completed later on in the last few books by Brandon Sanderson after Robert Jordan's passing. Recently was the anniversary of his passing, and I just want to say I appreciate that man for all the work he put in, for the time he put in. It's devastating to me that he's not even still alive today, but that he couldn't finish the series himself. I am interested to see what Sanderson did with the end of the series, but just thinking on it, it's like there's so many authors that I love that are alive today, or that I love that have been gone for a very long time, but he hasn't, he's a more recent author who I will never get to meet and never get to say, thank you for this wonderful series. So these videos are kind of a thank you because I do like these books and I want to get into why, and I want to get into my thoughts being halfway through a huge series of high fantasy. When people ask about the book series and they find out how long it is, they really often ask, is it worth it? And a lot of the internet asks that question. I see a lot of people who start, like they've read The Eye of the World and they maybe read The Great Hunt after that, and then they often decide they don't want to read anymore. And there's zero judgment from me to that. I think there's very good reason why you may not want to spend your time reading the series. I have my own reasons for continuing on with the series. So, do I like the books? Yes. Would I recommend them? Not necessarily, and we'll get to why. But first, I wanted to talk about where I'm at halfway through and how I feel about it and why I'm enjoying them. Because I don't want to give any spoilers. It will just generally be a which characters am I liking the most, what maybe cultures or little snippets have I enjoyed, which books have sort of been my favorite, that kind of thing. And I think the most important thing for me is largely going to be characters. I really love the characters of The Wheel of Time, and I think that's one reason a lot of people keep going with these books. You get attached to these young kids from a village who are thrown into the world. It's very, like, The Eye of the World feels like, Lord of the Rings-esque. Small town sheep herder and his buddies get swept away on a quest, and it turns into this whole thing. But I think where it goes is a lot deeper than a lot of high fantasy type stories, and I'm very surprised with where things have gone, and in other ways very just pleased and entertained by the character progression. So there's technically a lot of main characters. Rand is sort of the main, and I love this character. I thought he would be a little bit more generic, Chosen One vibes, and actually it's almost especially after watching the show, because I really like the casting and I wanted more of Rand. I realized that I found Rand to be an entertaining main protagonist because he's endearing and he's trying his best constantly to do what is right, and also at the same time is overwhelmed by this sort of destiny that's thrust upon him and the madness that follows using the magic that he is using. Just that surety that things are going to devolve, but he's doing what he can while he still has his mind as much intact as possible. I find that compelling. Sometimes I do miss the small village sheep herder character, but I think that's the point, you kind of lose yourself in these grander themes in the world, and it's just kind of inevitable with everyone in the story that they aren't their small town selves anymore, and that's the whole point of their character arc and everything. But I think with Rand especially, it's sad because he has so much responsibility on his shoulders, and he's surrounded by people who worship him or don't trust him or hate him or want to use him, and it's really lonely, and I like how isolated his character is. I am still entertained by a lot of the characters, and Rand's relationships with them help you see who he is because they care a lot about him, and a lot of the themes that go with him and his madness are about like staying afloat and actually embracing your emotions, because if you lose that and you go cold, you can become, dangerous. I don't know. I just think it's cool that they like address that, and I think it's cool where Rand is going. Matt's story has kind of a slow start and it grows more interesting. I think that he is sort of meant to be like the troublemaker and the flirt of the group, and so naturally I think he becomes like just this beloved character who's actually endearing and good-hearted. There's a particular set of scenes in book 7 where you see his behavior held up against a woman's behavior of a more non-consensual nature. And it is interesting to see how women perceive him being a player, and in his mind he perceives himself to be, a flirt, but only until she says, hey, no, I don't want to be chased. And I think that Robert Jordan knows how to make this character actually good, and contrasting that with how the women see him, in his heart that he is good. And it's just cool following that and following his like begrudging hero vibes, which are different than Perrin's, because in Matt's case, it's, he just wants to go home and live his life. It's not so much, oh, I'm not a hero. It's like, well, if I have to be a hero, I guess I gotta lead these men, like that kind of vibe. It is begrudging in that it's almost like he recognizes his strengths, but he just doesn't want to have to use them. And I like that kind of character work. There's some really interesting stuff with his sort of effect on the pattern, being Taverin, and his abilities in games of chance, including those in life. There have been some really cool scenes with him, and I'm interested to see where they go, because I've heard they only get better, and it's one of the reasons I've been able to stick with the middle, more slow books. But yeah, I like Matt. When it comes to Perrin, I think that he was also cast really well, and I think about this. So, the Wheel of Time show has received some hate, but one thing I'm not mad about in the slightest is the casting. I'm trying to think if there's anyone I don't like, and I don't think that there is. I think I appreciate everyone they've cast. I think they all did a great job. If you're worried about their skin tone, weird, but their acting's good, so maybe you should be thinking about that. I really love how they cast them. Perrin is this big old softy, and he's battling with this desire for peace and to not fight, but it's just interesting where that takes him. And also everything with his connection with the wolves is always interesting. I'm fascinated by it, and I'm really I kind of wish there was more of that in the show, but I really like that for him. Book 4 is famously just a great book for Perrin. That ending is my favorite ending so far in any Wheel of Time book. But I like Perrin's perspectives. Some of them get a little slower, and there's a certain dynamic with a certain character that I'm waiting for it to be resolved, because I just feel like he's been given the answer on how to deal with it, and he's not dealing with it. But maybe that's because as a woman, I'm like, bro. But I just think, I really like Perrin. I think his begrudging hero stuff is that he is a hero, and he's like, no, I'm just a blacksmith. I'm not a fighter. I'm not a hero. And it's like, everyone's like, hey, Lord Perrin, like, you saved us, and stuff like that. And he still doesn't get it, even though he's trying to do what he can with it. And, I like where his character has kind of gone. Gawain actually is one of my, I really like certain plot points that have happened with her that surprised me when they came up. If you have read the books, you might know what I'm talking about, what happens to her. No spoilers there, but if you read it, you get to it. It's really cool. A lot of responsibility for her in a way that I think she's handling well, as far as I can tell. I just like how she's dealing with it, and I really like her explorations there. I think that her time with the Aiel, out in the desert in the Aiel Wastes, has been like really good for her, and has shaped her character to be more responsible and less childish, as she was kind of treated like a child by these wise ones throughout some of the later early books. but it was good for her, and it led to some really interesting character development for her. I think the women get some more like critique, and I understand why, I really do, but I feel like everyone really likes Nynaeve. I love Nynaeve. So she has, from the beginning, she has a lot of power in the One Power, but she, bless her heart, has a block in using that power, and that's a trope I really like, because you can explore like an external manifestation of a character's weakness as a person, and she really can only use the magic when she gets mad, and it's quite entertaining because she is mad all the time, but she's really angry, like she's like peeved constantly, but in the best way. And that's another reason I think that she was really well cast. I think the actress who portrays Nynaeve got a good grasp of that maternal protectiveness, even though she's not that much older than the others, and it's just great. And sometimes how much the women bicker at each other makes me mad, and then I think of some friendships I've had where it's like you can like be so mad at each other, but you'd also die for each other. And so like I appreciate that as a woman with other female friends, that like that's a lot of the feelings sometimes, is the bickering, but with a lot of love attached to that and care. And Nynaeve cares a lot, and I like her progression with Lan. Just a little subtle, nothing crazy spoiler there. I really like Lan. I think he's a great character, and I've loved Moraine. I want to cosplay as her. I think that'd be really fun. So I don't know. These are the main characters to start off with, and Tom, of course, but he's the Gleeman 8K, like the bard with knives, and I love him too. I think that's the thing, is like all these characters, some of them have some special arcs, but for the most part, they are more typical fantasy. But because it was explored in the 90s and early 2000s, I think it's a little bit more modern, and I think that's carried on with the show in a progression that's not pushed too much based on the books, but like still embraces the authenticity of the story. Speaking to Egwene's experience with the Aiel, they're really cool people, sort of related to Rand's character. They live out in the wastes, like barren desert. Very well-trained fighters, especially the Maidens of the Spear. They're super cool. So that's, I think, my favorite culture that's been explored. I think they have quite honorable values that I respect and have actually like kind of changed me as a person. They have a sort of system for owing someone and making up for the hurt you caused at them or the trust you've betrayed, and it's helped me as a person sort of honor my relationships, and you know, like what would these characters think about my behavior, or how should I change, and how can I show more respect towards someone, especially to the people who maybe I have wronged or whatever. So I think it's actually been really cool to explore that, and me as a person, I find a lot of extra, it's like I get extra credit when I read a book and it has a theme that's important to me as a person, you know. I think my favorite book is book 4. Like I mentioned with Perrin, that's a pretty important book, pretty great events all around though, as I'm thinking about it. And after that, I liked book 5 actually more than I thought. 6 and 7 were more okay for me, and I'm on book 8 right now, and I've heard this one is maybe the slowest, and I can see that. The opening's pretty good, pretty engaging, but every now it's just like there's a lot of politics in the middle. So book 1 is like special, and there's scenes that I love with the characters that like I miss their innocence in that way, but it is a little bit more generic of a plotline in some areas given the quest vibes and the off-on-land adventure, and then it's a little bit messy at the end, either for you don't, you know, like a little Raffo reasons, like you gotta read ahead and find out what happened, or it was just, you know, his first book in the series. Actually, books 2 and 3 were interesting to me. I liked the ending of 3 quite a lot, actually. And the ending of 2 and some of the explorations of the Sianchin, is that how you say it? See, I don't know. People who enslaved the Aes Sedai. And it's really interesting what they do with that and how they carry that forward. It's kind of terrifying. It's a very real threat. And that's another thing that I like about the series. there is a character, he is the Dark One, and you are supposed to be afraid of him. I think that's especially present when you see like the Trollocs, these like half man, half beast creatures who love to kill and to eat and to just terrorize people. And the eyeless, that lead them and all this stuff. And it's I liked that stuff earlier on, and I'm missing that a little bit. But the Dark One isn't the only threat. There are other threats. There are the Children of the Light, this sort of, I would go as far to say, women-hating band of men who oppress women who can use the magic and just kind of oppress anyone they think is a dark friend, a servant of the Dark One, even though they themselves have members of their ranks who aren't trustworthy, and they, as an organization, I think, just suck, and they're the worst. And they frighten me as a woman. I can feel that, like, the mistrust, the expectation that, oh, if she's an Aes Sedai, like, we should kill her, we should, it's kind of gross. It makes me feel sick, and he writes them so scarily well. And then you have the Forsaken, who were once sort of like the sub-gods to the Dark One, and now they have each their own agenda, and it's like, as you're working toward what you can feel momentum toward the Dark One, Rand and all the others are having to deal with the Forsaken. And as far as, and that's been entertaining for me because they each have their own agenda, they each have their own thing that they're interested in, and their way about things that you get to explore that. And that's been like an entertaining group of plot lines to follow. So it's not just big battles with the Dark One's servants, it's like a lot of evil out there, and not even evil, just contention and conflict in general, and that I like. And character contention has been interesting. There's some characters I'm like, just get back together, just figure it out, and there's other characters that I'm just like, don't trust them, whatever. So it's interesting. There's a lot going on, and if you can get used to that, if you like when there's a lot going on like that, I think it's really enjoyable. I love how Robert Jordan surprises me, and I love getting invested in the lore. Like, I want to read the glossary at the end of the book. I have that desire. I actually care to learn more about the culture, and I'm not a big lore person, I'm more about how the story makes me feel. Just the act of reading itself can be comforting, and I love characters. So given that I have this desire to stick with the lore, I can tell that I am actually enjoying these stories, and to the point where I was watching the Wheel of Time show with my sister because she wanted to experience some of the story without having to read all the books right now. If she doesn't really want to read the books, it's a big commitment. And we were like watching it, and I had already seen the show. But when I had seen the show last winter, I'd only read The Eye of the World, and that's kind of what propelled me forward to reading the other books. And there were so many times where I was like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. This connects to this. Or even just the little girl having a doll named Brigitte. I was like, oh, wait, I know who that is. And I actually think the show is good. That is my personal take. I think they appreciate it, the story, for what it is. I think they need some help in just actually writing story, and that might seem harsh, but the ending of the season just proves that to me. A lot of weird, pointless things happen, and a lot of things happen that now that I've read further, I'm like, oh, I see where you're trying to get to, because they can't spend 14 plus years making this show, even just for the simple fact that you can't keep actors around that long and they will age. So it is a big feat. I think it can still be managed, especially since The Eye of the World is one of readers' least favorite books anyway. So let's give them a chance with the rest of the series and the other books, and I'm really hoping that it pans out. I think season 2 is going to hold books 2 and 3 kind of in the mix, and I think it can so be done. I think there's a way to structure that. And there are some books that I actually think should be combined in a season because the ending isn't really climactic enough. And I'm just interested to see where it goes. But I can tell that they're at least somewhat invested in the lore. And there are other mistakes they made that, like, maybe not even mistakes, just choices that I think they could go back on, honestly, and just move forward and write something better next time. I really think it can be improved upon. And ultimately, I'm really just invested in it's like I feel like I understand why gatekeeping is a thing. I'm not condoning it. I think it's stupid, but being so deep in these books, I'm dying to like look at memes and stuff, but I know I will and have received spoilers because of it. And I want to be part of the conversation. And I'm just excited to talk with other people of any perspective who have read these books, but I want to talk about it, give it my perspective. And yeah, I'm enjoying it. And I think the reasons why people might not enjoy it, why I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to you who are watching, it's a commitment. It's big books. Like, if you don't want to do that, you might not, maybe you shouldn't, because there's no should about it. I would not say you should read this unless you're like, I want to consume all the popular, well-written high fantasy that I can. In that case, I'd say, well, this is popular, well-written high fantasy. Why don't you read it? So I think if you are really, if you care a lot about high fantasy, if you care a lot about that kind of story and you want to spend the time or are okay with it, I understand. Something that's been hard for me is that I have not been able to read these books in like direct succession of each other. I read like maybe at most 2 books, one after the other, and then I read other books in between. Right now I'm planning on an October-ish TBR that's like has no Wheel of Time books in it because I want to take a break. It's not because I don't like them, it's just because I need to sort of cleanse my palate to jump back into them. And so that's a thing I've had to deal with. And if that kind of experience sounds exhausting to you, I would not necessarily recommend them. Watch the show. I actually think if you want to watch the show and talk to a Wheel of Time fan, they can tell you the things that went wrong. Or maybe I'll make a video about all the differences between the Eye of the World and the first season of the Wheel of Time. But like, it's okay to not read these books. If you are a fantasy fan, that doesn't make you any more or less having read them. It just means that you wanted to read the series and you did. That's all that it means. But I'm excited to have more conversations with people about it, and I don't know, I really like these books. So just some forewarning, there's multiple character POV. There are a lot of names that I still have not been able to digest perfectly. He does give little explanations here and there when they return to characters, but honestly, I still have a hard time keeping up. But the important thing is the main character's experiences, I think, make sense. You remember them, sticks with them. But it is a long ride and it is a commitment. And it's like, if you want to try it though. You know, they're books. It's not going to hurt to read a couple. I don't think it's a waste of time. But I think if there's other books you'd rather read and you feel obligated to read the series for a non-emotional, like, clout reason, don't read them, because that's stupid. No one should make you feel that way. And if I made you feel that way, I'm so sorry. Not my intention. I just genuinely like these books and I'm excited to see where they go. And I think for me, now that I have the momentum, I'm invested in the characters, even though the plotline of these middle books is sluggish. I'm looking forward to where they're going, to what experiences they have, further these characters and these arcs and everything. And I think it's going to be worth it for me. So if you feel like it wasn't worth it for you, or if you feel like you're not so sure about it, maybe think on it after watching this video or watch other people's videos. And if you have read The Wheel of Time, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Non-spoiler thoughts, please. And yeah, those are my thoughts and ideas. All right, I'll make more videos about these books because I like these books and I'm just excited to see where they go. If you have any thoughts, please share them down below in the comments. I'm interested to see, like, those of you who have read it. Was the time spent on these books worth it? Do you wish you'd read other things instead? What was your least favorite book? What was your favorite book? Just tell me what you think about The Wheel of Time. And if you have any other questions about my experience with The Wheel of Time, let me know and I may just respond in the comments or make a video on it. And yeah, I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you later with another video.